Welcome to Community Connections. Thanks to our Sun City veterans, you will meet and hear from a true American hero who played a key role in a historical event.
Good evening. Our guest speaker tonight is a retired C-17 Special Operations pilot with 22 years of service. A native of San Diego, California, he attended the United States Air Force Academy, graduating in 2001, where he was a Division I wrestler. In the service, he progressed rapidly as a pilot in the Air Force, and he became the C-17 Operations Officer in 2012, the Chief of J-33, or Current Operations at CENTCOM, in 2015, then Special Assistant Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in 2016, Commander of the 16th Airlift Squadron in 2018, and as the Director of the C-17 Special Operations, he was the Air Mission Commander who led the airborne assets in the final exfiltration of all U.S. troops from the fateful Afghanistan event in August of 2001. He retired in March of 2023, having logged over 4,000 hours with 1,000 hours in combat operations. He was awarded 2 major awards amongst many others. I'll just mention the 2. The Air Force Distinguished Flying Cross, and that was for his service with the Afghanistan exfiltration, and a unique one, the first Sully Sullenberger Award for Courage. Recall, Sully Sullenberg is the person, the airplane pilot, I think he was an Air Force Academy graduate, correct? Who ditched his commercial aircraft in the Hudson River several years ago. So this was the first time this award was given, and it went duly to Alex. Are you still a pilot with Okay, he's a pilot with Southwest Airlines in his spare time. We were put in contact with Alex in May of 2025 through our Marine Corps friend, Colonel Neil Puglisi, and we knew immediately that we wanted to hear Alex's message. It's an important one. Since then, Alex has announced his intention to run as a Republican for the 1st Congressional District of South Carolina, but that matter is for another club in Sun City to take up. He is here tonight to give us his experience in Afghanistan and to help us understand how things went wrong and what we can learn from it. So with that said, let me introduce the man who witnessed and had to deal with tremendous chaos in the final weeks of the evacuation of the U.S. presence in Afghanistan. Please welcome Alex Pelbath.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. We're good to go, I think. No, I think we're, if you just hit the next button. Okay. I'll let you do your thing. Well, thank you. I'll just start by saying thank you for allowing me to be here tonight. I am a candidate for the 1st Congressional District. Let me tell you how grateful I am to be able to not talk about politics for once and just spend time with people who love America like I do. So thank you all for your services as we go into this. Here, I'll make a deal with you, though. This talk is not, look, it's impossible to separate all the politics from this. I think it had a hand in it, but that's not what I focus on. What I'm going to talk about is the leadership lessons learned from the battlefield of this crazy, chaotic evacuation. I title this talk, Thriving in Chaos, and that's really what I focus on. But I'll make a deal with you. We're going to do some Q&A at the end. I'll answer all your questions, and I'll tell you exactly how I really feel when we get to that point. That's a deal? All right. Well, I'm sure you've all heard it before. No plan survives first contact with the enemy, right? In the Air Force, we say flexibility is the key to air power. But I don't think anybody said it better than the great philosopher, Mike Tyson. Everyone has a plan, until they get punched in the mouth. Well, in August of 2021, we got punched in the mouth. See, we went there to fly a mission that I had flown hundreds of times before. As a matter of fact, all of the pilots and operators had been in and out of this field over my 20-year career countless times. But what we encountered in August was unlike anything we had ever seen. And it started here. This is a picture of Kabul International Airport. And as you can see, much like Charleston International Airport just up the road where we're stationed, this is a runway, dual-use runway, international airport on the south side, bisecting what on the north side there is the actual military base. Well, on this day, the way it started was with us conducting what we would consider to be normal C-17 loading operations. I had just landed from what would turn out to be multiple missions in and out of Kabul. And at this moment, I'm standing in our Joint Operations Center. And as I'm standing there, a call comes across the net. In a panicky voice, we hear, "There are people on the runway." Now, if you're a pilot, that is not something you are used to seeing. So naturally, all eyes turned towards the runway, but it wasn't people we saw. It was a tidal wave. And before we knew it, the airfield was overrun and that small ramp surrounded. Those who could took shelter in nearby buildings. Those who couldn't simply barricaded themselves in their cockpits. And over the next few days, the world watched this scenario unfold, mostly via Twitter, actually. But for those of us who were there, there was only one word we can use to describe it: chaos. Now, if I let this video play, here's what you'd see. This aircraft right here was piloted by two of my younger guys, Joe and Ken, from right up the road at Charleston Air Force Base. Joe and Ken had just landed sort of in the middle of the airfield being overrun. By the way, this is the day that the troops all began referring to as the zombie apocalypse. So Joe and Ken land right in the middle of the zombie apocalypse. And before they can even get to parking, they get a radio call that says, "Hey, don't even bother coming in here. Get back to the runway and get out of Dodge as fast as you can." So Joe and Ken begin taxiing back to the runway. This is the imagery you see. This video taken by an Afghani, by the way. Well, Joe and Ken are trying to come up with a plan. How the heck are they going to pull this off? Well, they eventually get to the end of the runway, and as they're discussing it, at the time we had brought in 2 Apache helicopters. The helicopters are flying real low over the crowd, trying to get the crowd to disperse, but nothing is working. So as they're sitting there, they kind of remember, hey, this runway is 10,000 feet long. It's almost 2 miles. If we taxi real slowly down this runway, it's unlikely the crowd will be able to keep up. So that's what they do. They taxi down. Sure enough, about halfway down the runway, the crowd stops. Joe and Ken get to the end of the runway, do a quick 180. They're able to see how far down the people are and do a little bit of math in the cockpit and realize, hey, they've got enough space to take off. And they go for it. What they don't know, what none of us knew, is that 5 people had climbed up under the gear well and were hanging on. And as they climbed away, we watched as the bodies began to fall. And this was the first day of what would turn out to be a 17-day operation with us encountering things we never encountered before, especially in a combat zone. And what would turn out to be, after 17 days, the largest airlift evacuation in history. So how did we do it? Well, the answer is leadership. Because while it was terrible leadership that got us into this mess, it was outstanding leadership by our youngest people, our frontline leaders, who got us out. And so that's what I'm going to talk about. Look, there are many leadership lessons from this. I've extracted 3, and I'm talking to a bunch of vets. Here's what I hope. You guys know this. I'm not going to teach you anything you haven't heard. Here's what I hope is that it just jars some memories, that you're nodding along in remembrance of how important these leadership lessons are, and that this is something that we can share with others going forward. So the first of these leadership lessons is this: Great leaders break the rules. Great leaders break the rules. Now listen, I always ask everybody to take a big mental step forward with me on this, okay? We're never going to do anything illegal, immoral, or unethical. But everything else is a judgment call. Because though rules are written for a reason, you can't possibly write a set of rules that will cover every situation you're ever going to face. Let me give you an example. C-17 normally holds 102 passengers. Every person in a seat, every seat with a seatbelt, according to normal FAA and Air Force rules. But in the midst of our chaos, we did this. Oh, not that. 830 people on this C-17. No seats, let alone seatbelts. We were flying broken aircraft, carrying more passengers, flying more hours, well outside the normal bounds of the rules. And we did it because that's what the situation required. You see, the punchline is this. A leader's job is not simply to obey the rules. A leader's job is to apply judgment in the application of the rules. Great leaders break the rules. My favorite one, I'll be honest, it's my favorite point. Leadership lesson number 2. Great leaders give intent, not orders. As I'm sure many of us have learned in here, when you give orders or get orders, you know what happens when you give orders? People do what you say. But they may not always do what you want. See, we're facing things in the middle of this environment that we never imagined we'd face. See all those people on a C-17? Just one aircraft bathroom. And a culture that wasn't really used to indoor plumbing. In that 3-hour flight back to our main operating base, things were getting pretty unsanitary. It got so bad that we would land at our main operating base and it was taking our maintenance personnel 3-4 hours just to re-sanitize the airplane and turn the airplanes, again, get them flying. And look, if you're in the Air Force, airplanes on the ground is no good. We need those airplanes in the air. This was really slowing the operation down. Well, I came out to my airplane one day and I found a solution to this problem taped to the bathroom door. Look, if you can't see this real clearly, what this is a diagram of how to and how not to use a toilet. And every time I look at this picture, I immediately think of the poor lieutenant sitting in his cubicle, Googling, searching the imagery to make this thing. I believe this thing belongs in a museum. Well, right below this, on the floor in the front of the bathroom, was a huge industrial roll of plastic. And we developed a new procedure. On our way into Kabul, before we picked up anybody, we took that plastic and we lined every horizontal surface of the C-17. Fill her up, fly back to our main operating base, and simply rip that plastic out and get the mission moving again. Now here's what I can promise you. I don't know who came up with this solution, but it wasn't some general high up in the chain of command. This was a frontline leader solving a problem we never thought we'd face. Let me give you another example. This particular crew takes off from Kabul. Shortly after takeoff, a young pregnant woman goes into that bathroom. After a while, the crew realizes she's been in there for a minute. They go to check on her. Sure enough, she's in labor. So they talk to the pilots. The pilots are able to coordinate a priority clearance to the base, but they don't make it. About 20 minutes before landing, this young woman gave birth in that Air Force, or that aircraft lavatory. Not something you ever imagined you'd encounter in combat. And you know, what does TV teach us? You know, if you're gonna give birth like this, you need like towels and hot water or something like that. This, of course, crew had nothing. But here's the deal. When we give intent instead of orders, we allow frontline leaders to find creative solutions to complex problems. Okay, this goes all the way back to General George Patton. If you all remember his famous quote, "Don't tell people how to do their jobs, tell them what to do, and let them surprise you with their ingenuity." Leadership lesson number 3. I'll probably spend the longest talking about this. Great leaders understand their AOR. AOR, most of us know, stands for area of responsibility. Another way of saying this might be great leaders focus only on the things that are within their span of control. You know, one of the hallmarks of operating in a chaotic environment is frustration, coupled with that unpredictability. Frustration with how we got there. Frustration with, many of us see the right solution, but just aren't in a position of influence to make changes. Well, this type of frustration is something that can kill morale and kill a team. And so it's incumbent upon our leaders to make sure we are focusing on our area of responsibility. One of our biggest frustrations didn't even happen on the battlefield in Kabul. You see, we eventually got so efficient at bringing people out that we had created an enormous backlog at our main operating base called Al Udeid Air Base in the country of Qatar. The deed, we call it. It got so bad that we would fly to this base, land, and have to wait 3, 4, 5 hours just for a parking spot to open. Now, if you've ever had airline travel, you understand what this can be like. Right? You land somewhere, you've got a tight connection, but your gate's not ready, and you just sit there. The airplane's full of people, it starts to get hot, all you've got is that tiny little air spigot that basically does nothing. Look, I am a pilot for Southwest, I know that my AC works well up front, I apologize to all of you guys in the back. Well, now imagine, instead of being on an airline, you're on a C-17. And instead of airline seats, it's a hard steel floor. There's 500 of you. It's the Middle East. It's literally 120 degrees outside. And there's no air conditioning at all. In many cases, that frustration boiled over into violence as our passengers physically fought to get off the airplane. And we sympathized with them. Believe me, I wanted them off my airplane more than they wanted to get off the airplane. So, once again, we came up with our own solution. There was nothing I could do about that backlog and the mess on the ground. But what we could control was being in our own airplane. So our solution to that was simply not to land. There's a 3-hour flight from Kabul to the deed, but our passengers didn't know that. So we'd fly back to the deed, check in with tower, find out how long the wait was going to be on the ground, and instead of landing, we simply entered a holding pattern above the field. Up there at 20,000 feet where the AC worked great, as long as we were airborne, our passengers were happy. And when we started getting low on fuel, if the parking spot still wasn't ready for us, we'd put out a call over the radio to all aircraft asking if there were any air refueling assets in the area. On one of my flights, I got lucky. A KC-135 air refueler called us back and said, hey, we've got some gas. And so we coordinated right on the spot to go do a little air refueling, whatever it took just to stay airborne a little bit longer. But the best example of this principle of understanding your AOR I encountered was actually from a leader on the ground. I'm walking one day from my aircraft to our operations center, and as I'm walking, I hear something that literally stops me in my tracks. Children laughing. And so I went to investigate. And I took this picture. I love the contrast here between the desert, gross colors, the barbed wire fencing, and those 3 colorful bounce houses. Now, I have no idea where they conjured up bounce houses in the middle of the Middle East, but I do know this was a leader who understood his or her area of responsibility. You see, the way the numbers were, we were getting 12,000 evacuees into this base a day and only losing 2,000. It was exponentially becoming overwhelming. But this leader here found a way to bring a little bit of joy into their chaos by focusing on the things that were within their span of control. For me, this challenge, leadership challenge, was a little bit more personal as one of the commanders out there. I just got done flying one of our more difficult missions. It was somewhere in the middle, around August 24th. We landed back at the deed at the base, and you know what all aircrew do? I'm sure this is true of all military members. As soon as an op is over, you go to the chow hall. Everybody goes to the chow hall. So 2 o'clock in the morning, we're in the chow hall, and we happen to see on TV, Al Jazeera News is playing. And look, at this time, it's not going well for America. Okay, we essentially are trying to solve a math problem here. We have so many people we need to bring out of Afghanistan. We only have so many aircraft with which to do it, and we only have so many days remaining in the operation. And right now, the math is just not adding up. So Al Jazeera News comes on. At this time, we're sort of talking about extending the deadline of August 31st. And on Al Jazeera News is the Taliban commander. Taliban spokesman comes on, and he says, August 31st is a line in the sand. America will be gone by August 31st. Well, you can imagine how those of us facing down the Taliban every day felt about this. Since when does a terrorist tell the United States of America what to do? I better see my commander on TV tomorrow, reminding the Taliban of who they are and who we are. Well, we did see the commander-in-chief on TV the next day. And instead of rebuking the Taliban, he agreed with them. And so this told us two things. One, our commander doesn't have our backs. And two, things are going to get harder before they get easier. And they did get harder. Because just 2 days later, on August 26th, an ISIS terrorist detonated a suicide bomb, killing 13 Americans, wounding dozens more. This is the final 13 Americans to give their lives in America's longest war. Well, the very next day, I found myself back in Kabul. And we got an intel report earlier in the day that another suicide bomber had made it over the gate, and they're looking for him. And just as I finished loading my airplane full of evacuees, I got a radio call. It said they've located the suicide bomber, and he's on my airplane. So real quietly, we called out the security team. We didn't want to spook the herd, so to speak. And we begin the process of taking everybody off so that we can search them. And as I'm standing there amidst all these Afghans on the tarmac in Kabul, a couple thoughts crossed my mind. One, if he's here, he's not going to give up. He's just going to push the button. And there's nothing I can do about it. So I imagine, like many of us faced with things like this, I thought of my family. And right there on the tarmac, I pulled out my cell phone and I sent a quick text to my family's group chat. I don't want to freak them out or anything, so I just said, hey guys, I'm thinking about you. I love you. And then I put my phone away and went back to work. Now, it worked out, okay? I'm standing here today. It worked out. But you can imagine the level of frustration, all the thoughts I had going through my mind in the middle of this operation. So what do we do? As leaders, what do we do in this situation? We do the only thing we can do, and that's make sure our area of responsibility does not wind up being somebody else's frustration. And so for me, that was doubling down on the planning for the final mission that was going to occur in just a few days' time. On the night of August 30th, we execute what we call a JTE, a Joint Tactical Exfil. In the middle of the night, I had the opportunity to lead 5 C-17s into Kabul for the final time, completely blacked out, using nothing but night vision goggles to get in there. I had taken 3 additional C-17s with me on standby in case, the worst were to happen. We had over 30 aircraft in support roles flying overhead, fighters, bombers, UAVs, command and control. And of course, we had the entire 82nd on the ground with us. And at 1 minute prior to midnight on that night, I flew the final aircraft out of Afghanistan. Just 10 minutes after takeoff, I also had the privilege of making a radio call. This was the point at which we had egressed the combat zone, and by making that radio call, it officially ended America's longest war. 17 days, all of that chaos, and still the largest airlift evacuation in history. Because we had leaders who weren't afraid to break the rules, who understood the importance of giving intent instead of orders, and those who especially understood their area of responsibility. And because of that, however you feel about this, there are now 124,000 people who get to experience the freedom that only this country provides. Thank you guys very much for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you guys. You don't have to stand up. I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Colonel Pelbath, first of all, thank you for 22 years of military service you gave to our country.
Appreciate it.
You know, you've been here this evening, you've talked to our veterans about the key role you played in a historical event. You've had some years now. How do you reflect on that experience every day?
First and foremost, the amazing leadership displayed by so many of our young people. And I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of veterans through giving talks like this and traveling and meeting people. And what unites us all in all of our stories is that same theme, that so much of the burden of combat and chaos is placed on those who are in their early 20s and sometimes teenagers. And so when I look back on that, that is what I am constantly amazed by, is in spite of that chaotic situation that was thrust upon us, the amazing job our military did to find paths to thrive in that chaos.
Now, what do you think the normal civilians like me should understand about the discontinuation of service that we had of our military efforts in Afghanistan? How should we look at that?
Unfortunately, I think the perception is that Afghanistan was a failure. And, you know, I understand people have strong feelings either way. I'm very disappointed with the way that it ended. I'm very disappointed with the fact that it was political decisions by, in my opinion, leaders who were putting themselves ahead of the country. And so I think a lot of Americans are right in feeling the way they do about how our country ended. But if we're going to put a positive spin on it, I'm going to go back to what I just said. I mean, think about what the military had to do. Like, we didn't cause that problem. We found a way over 17 days. I think a lot of people forget it was a 17-day operation, right? And over that 17 days.
I think zombie apocalypse is a great way that you put it.
What a great,
I think you should have the T-shirt made. You should have the T-shirt made.
Troops always come up with great monikers like that.
This evening, a gentleman asked you, we as retirees, what can we do to support the military and to help? You've given us some good ideas. Would you share that with our viewers, though?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first and foremost, if you're a person of faith, and my faith is very important to me, faith is what carried me through that. My family is a Jesus-loving, God-fearing America First family. And so what I ask everybody to do is pray. Pray for the troops. Pray for the future of our country. Pray for our leaders. That's the kind of thing that matters. If you want to get involved outside of that, I mean, that's just something that's well within our ability to do.
Best of luck to you in
Thank you
all
so
of your
much.
endeavors. Thank you for taking the time with our fabulous veterans.
yeah.
They're a special, special
I
group of
appreciate
people.
it.